it was the launch of really what we became as an anesthesia company, but we wouldn't have gotten there without those 20 months. Bringing the people together that really believed in doing that same mission. We interviewed 43 CRNAs before we hired our first one because we were so really just dead set on following through with what we said of you have one chance to create something from the ground up. You got to do it right with the right people. And we did.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. So what if I told you that you could get CME credit just by listening to this podcast? Well, my guest today is not only a busy anesthesiologist, he's also a very successful entrepreneur, and he's bringing some remarkably creative ideas to continuing medical education. I think we can all agree that that's a subject that could really use some creative ideas. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Brian Cohen. I want to welcome everybody to Prescription for Success, and I'm really looking forward to my conversation today with Dr. Brian Cohen, who is an anesthesiologist, among other things, down in South Florida. Brian, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Randy. Same here.
As is always our practice, Brian, we like to get a little bit of your origin story before we get into what you occupy yourself with right now. So I'm very interested in finding out about how you got into medicine. Was this a childhood dream, or was there some particular influence or a friend or a family, or how did that come about?
Can't remember ever wanting to be anything other than a doctor. So it did start at a young age. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to get there, the exact path, but the desire was there. I'm not sure I knew exactly what it meant either. I had some family members in medicine, an uncle who was a cardiologist. My father's a dentist, another uncle who was a surgeon. So I had the intrigue, but the path was yet to be discovered.
And you never had any interest in dentistry?
I did until I saw my dad was coming home kind of tired of the drill and fill routine. And, it just was a little bit of a warning sign of maybe that wasn't for me. Now, he actually was able to sort of pivot into some other things through the rest of his career from the business side and dental insurance aspect. But that was happening right around the time where I had to make a decision. And I say had to because I actually ended up at a 6-year program. It was a BA MD combined program. So out of high school, I really was deciding whether to be a physician or not.
Did you feel really confident about it at the time?
I did. I think I felt confident about being a physician. I felt confident that there were benefits to this combined program. But I think the best way to describe my questions or my hesitancies was I remember the first week of college, and I call it college. It truly was integrated over 6 years. Your undergrad and medical school was scattered throughout a 6-year period. So my first week up there, I met this in the dorm, and I called my good friend from growing up, my closest buddy in high school, and he was up at University of Pennsylvania, and it was both of our first weeks. And I'm like, oh man, this is pretty cool. We got Papa John's for us and a DJ down in the courtyard in the dorm. And he's like, yeah, mine's pretty cool too. Run DMC's playing right outside my window. That's when I realized my college experience may be a little different than my friends.
Well, I was kind of wondering about that. You're starting as a freshman, a college freshman. You've already decided what your career is going to be, and I have to say that in spite of the fact that my undergraduate curriculum was designed to be pre-med, but there was no question about the fact that this was something entirely separate. The college experience for me sounds like it was maybe less intense.
It can be a little bit counterintuitive, and especially as an 18, 19, 20-year-old going into it, and especially if you're somebody fairly dead set on becoming a physician, and so it's either you go into college and you have an insane amount of pressure on you to perform at the highest level for the next 4 years, so then you get into med school to residency and blah, 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 or you're already in. And now the pressure is just to learn and to do what you're, there to do. And by the end of it, looking back, we were very glad. We were both very glad we did it. Going through it, it was many moments of like the Run DMC conversation where you're constantly questioning your life decisions. But I think it was a balance of, a little bit less pressure, but also just, you knew you were handed an opportunity, don't mess it up.
Yeah, that's really, really, really interesting. And the other thing that I'm interested in knowing is at the time that you started that program, did you know that it was going to be anesthesia from the start, or did that had to evolve later?
Yes, I knew nothing about anesthesia, and really I found the whole process of deciding what specialty you were going to enter into really bizarre. Because if you look at medical school, you're not exposed to everything, right? You're exposed to medicine, surgery, psychiatry, OBGYN, and pediatrics. Those are your core rotations. We had 2 or 3 electives. Well, you sure as hell better hope that one of those 2 or 3 electives that you chose is actually something you like. Otherwise, you're at the end of your last year and it's time to apply for residency. I knew I loved being in the operating room, but I didn't want to choose the path of a surgeon. And I think, part of that came from, again, watching other family members who led more demanding, I'll say cardiology is a highly demanding specialty from a lifestyle point of view, who was also married to another physician. And I saw, now my wife and I were not married at the time, but, we had been together for a number of years. And I said, if I'm going to marry another physician, man, I want to try to find this balance in life. And, all the other specialties, I hate to say it, but I started checking them off. I said, I can't do this, I can't do that, but I love being in the OR. I had a couple friends the year above me and above them who were going into anesthesia. They said, you may want to try this out. And thank God, man, I enjoyed that rotation. I'm not going to lie, though. I still had no idea what was happening during the rotation. I didn't know what turning the dial this way or that way meant. I didn't know how people went to sleep, but I thought it was cool.
I think that's true for all of us at that stage. And you really don't know what you've bought until you're already the owner. And you actually sort of do a little traveling around with respect to postgraduate training to Missouri. You want to tell us that story?
Yeah, it's fairly standard from anesthesia, just as in radiology and some of the other specialties, where you have your intern year and then you have your 3 years of core residency. So for my intern year, I was looking to go up to Chicago, had again, most people's intern years are like the most miserable year of their life. Mine was amazing. But then I returned to St. Louis. I did anesthesia at Washington University in St. Louis, which was, again, back home for me, where I grew up. I decided to try to separate myself a little bit from feeling where I grew up. I got a loft downtown St. Louis and right by the hospitals and went to work every day there. And again, that was the opposite experience of my intern year. It was intense, and it was my first real exposure to, I don't want to say, well, yeah, egos. It was just this Ivy League mentality of egos. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with everybody? Like, it wasn't what I had pictured this well-oiled machine of an operating room being, to a point where when I was in my, halfway through, and I knew that my wife was now down in Houston for her residency, and I would have 1 year before she finishes when I'm already done. I said, this isn't really what I want to spend my life doing, getting yelled at by surgeons and competing with the guy next door and all this other stuff. I said, I'm going to apply for a pain fellowship and get out of the operating room. As I started filling out that application, I started reading, this is what you're going to be doing over the next year. And I'm like, man, this is an entirely new field of medicine. And I feel like I haven't even come close to mastering the field of anesthesia. How do I give up on this and then just start another one? And I put that application away. I didn't come back to it. I applied for a job in Houston with a private practice group. And again, these guys changed my perspective on what it meant to be an anesthesiologist, what it meant to be part of a team. Just very collaborative, very welcoming into what we were there supposed to be doing, which is taking care of the patients and each other. And that's not to say that, the training at Washington University was amazing. The attendings were amazing. The egos were amazing. It was all one big package.
That's a very interesting phenomenon, and I think it's something that a prospective residency applicant really doesn't know how to search it out. But I actually went to medical school in a very highly competitive program, and I could see what was happening to those people. The surgery residency had a steep pyramid, and there were some people that were going to put in 3 years and find out they didn't have a job and all those kind of things. And I didn't even put in an application there because of exactly what you're talking about. I didn't want to live in that kind of pressure. And, and I picked another spot, which turned out to be perfect at Medical College of Georgia. It had none of those there was pressure, but there was not the day-to-day, are you going to have a job? You've pointed out something that I think is very important that, I don't know if we have any potential medical students listening, but those are the things that you just don't hear about, right? You don't have any way of knowing what's ahead of you unless you ask the right questions, and you don't even know what to ask at that point, wouldn't you say?
Even if you did know to ask that, our system is set up in a way that when you ask that question, it comes across in a certain manner, right? So does that mean you're not here to work hard? You're not here to understand hierarchy and kind of the old school mentality, military mentality of how healthcare is set up? It doesn't necessarily mean that. Again, the reality is going into residencies, we don't always have that luxury to pick out that perfect club res every time.
Well, let's talk about the transition into private practice. Sounds like you moved along to Houston, and when you went to Houston, was that to sign up with a well-established group, or what was the situation? Your early experience in private practice?
Yeah, it was. So this was around the year of 2007, and it was an interesting time in anesthesia. And I think this can be sort of extrapolated out over a lot of different specialties because we all seem to go through these, 10 to 20 year waves of employed models, partnership models, independent models, wherever we go through, the peaks and the valleys. And so coming out of residency, the norm was every anesthesiologist who's graduating is going in and is going to be a partner in a group if they want to. That was the opportunity. I went in knowing that I was going to be there for a 1 year period, and being very honest with that group, saying, I would love to come in and work, as you mentioned, with a well-established group, because almost that's a fellowship in private practice in a way, right? My goal is to learn more there than I did in the past 3 years, so I can go out and take a piece of these 26 anesthesia partners and put together my own sort of recipe for my practice. There's a ton of learning, and being surrounded by supportive people rather than competitive people allows for that learning to happen. I can't tell you how many times I called for airway help or for, hey, what do you typically do for this case or that case? Huge benefit of being around people that are supportive. And That group was incredible. It used to be Greater Houston Anesthesiology. They were one of the first acquisitions of a large company called USAP, US Anesthesia Partners. And that gave me, again, the first taste of what may lie ahead in a partnership opportunity, what good medicine means, what collaborative medicine means. But again, being a little bit naive, I assumed that was just private practice. That was my first job. I assumed they were all like that, right? Academics was the residency life. Oh man, that was terrible, But this private practice thing, this is great, everybody's friends. This is wonderful. This is the way it's always going to be. And then South Florida happened, which taught me another lesson.
Well, now that was actually going to be my next question. You mentioned that you realized that first experience in private practice was not going to be permanent for you. Were you already had your eyes set on South Florida?
We did loosely. Again, both my wife and I grew up in the Midwest. She was from Kansas City. I was from St. Louis. And the Midwest is, in a wonderful way, it's usually when you're there forever. And when you settle in, it's very hard to leave. Generation upon generation, it stays in the same city. And the conversation was either we go back to the Midwest, forever, or we try something new. And something new was, we wanted to be by the water. We also wanted to be somewhere near family. And I did have some family that was in the South Florida area. So, that allowed us to say, it's now or never. Nothing's permanent, but if we don't do this now, it's very unlikely that we're going to try this later.
So you set up the plan and made your move to South Florida. And did it turn out to be precisely what you expected, or were there challenges?
No, it was curveball after curveball. And, I'll tell you a little bit about it. And again, would I change any of it? Probably not. It was going from that scenario in Houston into South Florida where it was very kind of every man for himself or herself mentality. I joined a group that had been established within a hospital in theory for almost 40 years. However, kind of eat what you kill, every man for himself, and finally becoming an actual group. But that culture never really evolved with it. It was still sort of, taking care of myself and everybody else takes care of their self. And that was new to me. It was also the presentation of come join our group. We'd like to have you. We're not guaranteeing that there's ever going to be another partner again, but there could be, and you could be that partner. And so they put out just enough hope for me to say, I'm determined to do this, and I'm going to make them convince themselves that they made the right decision, and I'm deserving of what they have. One thing I learned through this is that the culture that's been ingrained over years is very, very hard to change. And that was a pain point, that I didn't know what to do with, but it bothered me. Because I felt, I knew just from 1 year in Houston, I knew it could be better. I knew the medicine we were practicing could be better. I knew the collaboration could be better, the teamwork, everything about what it meant to have a group could be better. And it just wasn't there. But there weren't any options. If you look at the history of anesthesia, we're in the belly of the beast down here in South Florida. We're at the birthplace of Sheridan, which is now Envision, and Mednex and USAP, and all these major companies of the employed model were all based out of South Florida. So there weren't any options at the time, and I was there to make the best of it. I got a text message from somebody that I didn't know. He had gotten my name from another individual in the anesthesia group. They had done residency together years before, and he said, "Hey, do you want to start an anesthesia group for a new hospital in Miami?" And I said, absolutely not. I said, no way. I said, you lost me at Miami. But he said, let's just talk. We did, and we set up a phone call. I spent, about 2.5 hours on the phone with Shane, getting to know him. And he had worked at another large anesthesia company, hospital-based practice in South Florida for about the same amount of time as I had been here at my group, about 8 years at that time. We started sharing everything we didn't like about what was happening in anesthesia. But the conversation about this opportunity, and he said, when are you ever going to have another chance to start something from scratch and create it exactly how you want? And at that time, my answer to him was never. Who knew that that there was something called being an entrepreneur in medicine. No one had heard of it then. So, I remember very clearly, I walked upstairs. I told my wife, hey, I'm going to quit my job and start a company in Miami. She goes, okay. And I'm like, damn it, you weren't supposed to say that. Like, you were supposed to say, what are you, crazy, Brian? You can't do that. But she said, okay. Because we are a very good match, because she's everything I'm not, Randy. She's so calm and confident, and her response allowed me to be a risk taker. And that's really what allowed us to start down the process of starting a new company and launching a new hospital along with it.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests. Whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics, Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview.
The hospital lasted 20 months. Now, our group is still going strong 7 years later, but the hospital lasted 20 months. Yes. There's so many lessons learned. First of all, Miami is the Wild West of medicine. You have a major health system there that really controls a lot of the payers, managed care companies that are, these Medicare Advantage programs that all sort of run on their own rules. It's a very complicated system, but the thought was, this is a physician-owned hospital partnering with Miami Children's Hospital, the largest MSO in Florida, and a company out of Kansas called Nuterra. And that was what got me, Randy, because I'm a Midwest guy. And when I said I don't want to do anything in Miami because, it's a sunny city with shady people, is always what we say down here. I said, this is going to be balanced out because we got a good Midwest company coming in, to take control and bring some rational thought to this craziness. And the reality was it was just a very, very different landscape for that type of management company. And all those factors together, there were a lot of delays in opening. I had quit my job. I had given notice, my 90-day notice, and about 2 weeks after that, the hospital announced a 4-month delay and then another 2-month delay. So I had no job. So I said, well, I might as well get this hospital opened because that's the only way that I'm going to get, a case to do to get paid. So I drove to Miami every day, which is about an hour and a half drive from where I am, and sat with the CEO, the CNO, the COO, and said, let's open this damn thing. And really got to see kind of the inner workings of what is involved in doing that. Again, it was an education. it was free education. And it ingrained us as a company into every piece of the hospital, from wall to wall and floor to ceiling. We knew everything about why and what we were going to do, what we were going to do. And the premise behind this hospital was very culture based, meaning this was supposed to be a level of care that just didn't exist in Miami. And because we had physician ownership in it, every single person who stepped through the doors had a reason for it to be something special. And I mean, it worked, man. It worked from quality of healthcare. We were doing, up to 400 surgical cases a month, and these patients were leaving online reviews like they had just left the Four Seasons for a week. I mean, it was, and down the street, you have these 1.5 and 2-star reviews going at every hospital. So something was right, but they couldn't collect the money. They were losing $1.5 million a month. The real estate, lease was high. The collections were low. It was just these factors. And as much as we thought we were embedded in the fabric of the hospital, we had about a 1-day notice before it closed. It was the launch of really what we became as an anesthesia company, but we wouldn't have gotten there without those 20 months. Bringing the people together that really believed in doing that same mission. We interviewed 43 CRNAs before we hired our first one because we were so really just dead set on following through with what we said of you have one chance to create something from the ground up. You got to do it right with the right people.
Brian, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, but it is just an incredible story of success and belief in what you've got to work with, and the kind of thing where you really, if you have any kind of a soul, you love to see somebody succeed in those kinds of circumstances. And my hat is off to you, and I suspect that you're rather proud of what you've accomplished, and rightly so. But you didn't stop there. And this is going to be my segue into what I think is one of the most brilliant things that's come along in the way of dealing with continuing medical education. And if I've got this right, it actually began with Adaptrack. But if I've got that wrong, you can correct me. But tell us the story. Tell us how it started.
So, in parallel to the start of Miami Anesthesia Services in our group, I also began working with a medical liability company. So that was back in 2015 as a specialty medical director. That gave me, a little bit of another perspective of, again, risk in medicine, but also sort of the business entrepreneurial life of healthcare that can interweave with clinical life. So it didn't have to be all or nothing, but you could use one aspect of doing a job over here with the other and work together to make everything better. And through the world in the medical liability space, again, had the luck and pleasure of crossing paths with a couple new partners. One of which was working with a large managed care company for a number of years and just a super business mind. And the other is just this brilliant tech and we call human capital individual. And together it was really taking some of the things that Niraj from the tech side had already been working on as far as using technology to improve human behavior and throwing it into healthcare. And the first lane we really wanted to focus on was risk in healthcare. But the theme across all of this had to put the clinician in the middle. And that's really what Adaptrack became was, with a risk focused, how can we use all of the data and knowledge that we have in the medical liability space for the past 20, 30 years and the trends that exist and put them in a manner in front of clinicians so that they can engage with it, learn from it, change their behavior from it, but do it without interrupting their day. and that became very important, because the last thing we wanted to do is give somebody who's working so hard one more thing to do. And that's where, again, the behavioral economics of this from Niraj's background really kicks in with the introduction of micro learnings and really kind of figuring out, how do we think as clinicians and physicians? I don't want 3-hour lectures. I want 3 sentences. Tell me, what should I or shouldn't I do to get sued? What should I or shouldn't I do to improve documentation so that I'm not inefficient within my team model? What should I or shouldn't I do to decrease moral injury and burnout? But tell it to me fast, succinctly, and hey, maybe throw a little reward out there for me, because I'm engaging with it and I'm learning and I'm reflecting on it. And that reward for us became continuing medical education credits. And that's really the learning loop that sits behind Adaptrack and why we built it.
It's brilliant. I mean, you have explained the problem of continuing medical education as succinctly as I've ever heard it, and that is the prior design. Either got to travel somewhere and hear lectures that go on for hours, and may have one little nugget in there that really means something to you, or either get online and experience the same thing. But you guys really reinvented this thing, did you not?
Adaptrack gave us a taste of what clinicians really wanted right now when it came to medical education. Now, clinicians were starting to learn with each other in ways that we hadn't even imagined before. It wasn't just the sitting in a lecture hall or grand rounds on Wednesday afternoon at noon. It wasn't just attending a 4-day conference in the Bahamas, and it wasn't just relying on that one expert source to tell me what the gold standard has to be. It was experiential. It was in the moment. It was with peers. It was across different mediums. And it was happening, like crazy, especially in 2020, 2021. And as we moved into this year with CMEfy, what we built was essentially a technology platform that's transactional. You have a host and you have learners. That host has the ability to create links for learning moments that are happening around them. And if the learners that are learning with them or from them reflect on those links on how that learning applies to themselves and their practice, they're asked 2 questions. What did you learn and what are you going to do with it? So internal and external. How are you going to apply this learning? Those reflections with the technology that we've built generates a half a credit for each reflection. So you leave 2 reflections, that's 1 CME credit. And that does a couple things. It rewards the hosts who are, they can be a clinician or not a clinician, but you're catalyzing these learning moments. You're putting your voice out there, you're putting your knowledge out there, you're putting your time out there, and now you have the ability to essentially capture these moments that you're stimulating and reward your learners for learning with you. Now, from the learner side, it accomplishes, much of what you mentioned. It's taking these learning moments that we're already having. So now it's not one more thing for me to do. It's things that I'm already doing. And now I'm going to be rewarded for it. And I'm going to be rewarded for it not by attending something or not by listening to something or not by sitting through something for X amount of minutes. I'm rewarded by reflecting on it and telling me how it applies to me and what I'm going to do with that. At the end of the day, it's a digital platform that allows you to exchange knowledge and be rewarded for it. And it's built, again, with the clinician in the middle that's getting the reward for what they're doing.
Brian, it's really interesting. It has been said, trite though it may be, that there's nothing new under the sun. But I practiced medicine for 44 years before I retired. And in the beginning, there was much more of that exchange of information between medical professionals on a day-to-day basis, because we saw much more of each other eye to eye back in those early days of my practice. And then as the system evolved, it seems to me that we became more and more isolated. CME became a business that usually required that you travel somewhere and pay big money for lengthy discussions that you go away and you don't really feel like you're you don't feel like you're learning anything. But as you say, along came the pandemic, and everybody was up to their neck in alligators trying to figure out, how are we going to get this swab trained? And they had to talk to each other. You want to tell the audience a little bit more of the details about how CMEfy works and how they can take advantage of it?
We can separate into two different personas as far as the users, and that's the individual clinicians and more of the groups or enterprises or companies. From an individual clinician side, you literally log on and you get started as low as $9 a month, and you can start creating links within about 20 seconds. From the organization and company side, again, it's a little bit of a different log on because we always validate who's coming in. We need to be very careful about any kind of bias around the learning scenarios. But once you're through the process, again, within about 2 minutes of logging on, you're creating links for. We've seen that now really not replace traditional CME departments, but it can even be an addition to for health systems. As chief medical officers take this into their health systems, large organizations, you're looking at as low as $499 a month to create unlimited links and have unlimited learners. CME has put a lot of the costs have trickled down to the learners. We've sort of flipped that model. Again, learning is free. You have as soon as you sign up, you have a learning journal. That learning journal is where you claim all your credits. You print your certificates. You have you can look back at all of your reflections you've made over time and what you were reflecting on. It's really kind of a one-stop shop so that you're organized with all your learnings there. And it also takes the responsibility of managing that side of the CME world off of the host, whether that host is, again, a physician or a health system, learning department.
But just to underscore, although it is available for big groups, it can be accessed by individuals as well for a very reasonable cost. And we are very excited at RX for Success and our mothership, MD Coaches, and that we're going to be partners in this. And this is really new stuff. Maybe you'd like to tell our audience about your conversations with Rhonda Crow and where we're going to take this thing, because you probably know more about it than I do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about conversations with Rhonda and groups like yourself, Randy, are, we create the tools, but we just hand you guys the keys to the car and watch you do what you do. You guys are the ones sparking these learning moments. You guys are the ones having conversations that make other clinicians think about how to take that information and use it themselves. And they don't have to agree with it. They could listen to this podcast and say, I don't agree. That's good. That's fine. Because you're reflecting on it and you're thinking about it and you just learned something. So you know what? Get some credit for that. And, we have some other exciting things in the pipeline as well. Right now, this has been AMA-PRA Category 1 credits, which apply mostly to MDs, DOs, NPs, PAs, and AAs. We are this summer launching the same product, but out and available for nurses, pharmacists, dentists, and a couple other specialties. So there's lots more to come.
Well, Brian, this is very, very exciting, and I can't tell you how I'm looking forward to being a part of this entire project. It sounds like it's really going to be not only educational and a chance for improvement, but I think it's going to be fun, and I'm really looking forward to it. Having come to that point, it's time for me to get out of the way here and let you be in the spotlight all alone. So I'm going to close my mic, and we'll do what we always do here. Dr. Brian Cohen is going to share his personal prescriptions for success.
Thank you, Randy. Well, my personal prescription for success, we touched on a little bit throughout the conversation, but I'm going to try to summarize it here. The definition of success is very personal. It can change every year. week, or day, and that's okay. As long as you don't sacrifice your standards, the recipe and the end product is fluid. And in my opinion, the prescription for success is having the maturity to change with it and the partners to weave through the journey with you. Because what happens when you reach your goal? Then what does success become? Or what happens if you get halfway there and you realize, well, this kind of sucks. I think success for me may be like over here instead. In med school, my version of success was settling into a little beachside practice and enjoying a stress-free life. In residency, my version of success was becoming a partner in an anesthesia practice. And then I was offered the opportunity to redefine my success and receive my own pen to create the path towards it. Help start an anesthesia company and help start a hospital. When my 3 new partners and I sat down to figure what that actually meant, we literally sat down with a pen and paper and rewrote our mission. Our definition of success was to create a culture of providers that existed within a group that respected each other, relied on each other, took care of each other, and all the rest would follow. And, anesthesia is a unique field in medicine. It's a specialty that exists in a group form with tens or even hundreds of providers that, quote, rely on each other, but we rarely work with each other. So many of our interactions are in parallel rooms in the operating room or in different shifts. And we kind of said, screw that. We're a team. We're a family. If you want to join it, let's go. In 20 minutes after this amazing physician-owned concierge surgical hospital opened its doors in the heart of Miami, and 20 months after we started Miami Anesthesia Services, the hospital closed. So now what's success? Now, I felt this bizarre sense of carrying not just my own success, but the 35 individuals and their families that depended on us. And I hadn't felt that before. And honestly, it was completely overwhelming. Those emotions, those days, they honestly sucked so much of the life out of me that I wasn't quite sure I was able to set another goal. Because I felt like if I put that much into this, and this is the end result, then what else do I have to do to reach success and not failure? I told my partners I couldn't do it again. They told me, come back the next day. We sat in that empty hospital. We chatted. And we sat there and reminisced about what we had been through. We also realized that we had not failed. We had actually succeeded. We had actually created a culture within these walls that did not exist anywhere else, in which we became family and worked beautifully together to achieve the goals in which we set out. Well, it turns out that effort and the sweat equity that we all put into creating this success was appreciated by the surgeons that we worked with. And they began reaching out to us to come to their other centers. The management companies started to hear that there was this alternative to big box anesthesia in South Florida. And meetings were happening almost every day. And now, 5 years after the closure of that hospital, we're providing anesthesia at 9 centers from Palm Beach to Miami and created an MSO that provides anesthesia services throughout the rest of the state of Florida. We redefined our success, and we also recognized our failures. So for me personally, this journey has allowed me to bucket success in a few different angles. I found a passion for other more widespread ways to drive impact to my peers and colleagues through technology and other partnerships. And again, by finding the right partners, I've had the opportunity to co-create 2 more companies centered at driving value back to clinicians, Adaptrack and CMEfy. I've lived a professional roller coaster over the last 7 to 8 years, and it's forced me to appreciate so many other pieces of this healthcare puzzle. And medicine is all about learning from others to better yourself. The same mistake should not happen twice when a patient's well-being is at stake. The same goes for ourselves. And my mission is still about creating environments in which culture of caring exists as we collaborate together. That could be a new ASC that my group is providing anesthesia at, or a co-learning moment in which CMEfy is allowing clinicians to knowledge share and be rewarded. So for now, that, in balance with my family at home, is my current prescription for success, at least for today.
Well, Brian, thank you very much. I think you are definitely in a position to give some advice on how to be successful, because you fought some battles, and no doubt you have some scars, but what you have to show for it is very, very impressive. Before you go, I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know where they can find you and where they can find CMEfy.
Sure. Everything's at the website, CMEfy.com. You also have Adaptrack.com and Miami Anesthesia Services.com. We've kept it pretty simple. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, Brian D. Cohen, MD on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with everybody. And hear your stories.
Well, thank you again for being with us. It's been a fascinating story, and I am really grateful that you took the time to be with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Randy. I appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. As always, we really appreciate a review from you, and a 5-star rating helps us a lot. These ratings give our show much more visibility, and they help us reach more listeners. If you'd like access to exclusive content, please head on over to our Patreon page, where you can see membership-only material, including personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests and more. To be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. And while you're there, you can offer your very own prescription for success on SpeakPipe. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music for the show. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.